The snap of the twig was louder than the howling wind. It was the sound of a heavy, deliberate weight breaking a frozen branch, the sound of something that was not the wind, not the snow, and not a dream. Elias froze. He was huddled inside the hollowed-out cavity of a fallen cedar giant, deep in the Cascade foothills of Washington state. In his trembling, frost-bitten hand, he held the only thing that mattered in the world, a thick slab of smoked venison jerky. It was his last meal. It was the only thing standing between him and the creeping, seductive lethargy of hypothermia. He held his breath. The blizzard outside was a white curtain of death, hammering the Pacific Northwest with record-breaking ferocity. Nothing should be moving out there. Nothing alive. Then came the breathing. Deep, wet, rhythmic huffing. It was close, inches from the blue plastic tarp that served as his door. The smell seeped in through the gaps, overpowering the scent of pine resin. It was musk, wet fur, and the unmistakable metallic copper tang of raw hunger. Elias slowly reached for the rusted camping hatchet by his knee, though he knew his grip was too weak to use it. With his other hand, clutching the meat to his chest, he pushed aside the heavy canvas tarp. Just an inch. 2 orbs of molten gold met his gaze. It wasn't a coyote. It was a timber wolf. It stood maybe 4 feet away, a gaunt, ragged silhouette against the swirling white snow. Its breath plumed in gray clouds. But what stopped Elias's heart wasn't the fear of being eaten. It was the shock of recognition. The wolf was alone. Wolves are pack animals. A lone wolf in a blizzard like this is a dead wolf. It is a biological error, and this one looked the part. Its ribs were corrugated ridges beneath patchy gray and black fur. Its left ear was torn almost in half, a ragged, weeping badge of some past violence. A fight for dominance it had clearly lost. The wolf didn't snarl. It didn't bare its fangs. It simply looked at Elias, and then its gaze dropped to the brown paper package in his hand. Its large, wet nose twitched. It was starving. It was freezing. It was an exile. Elias looked at the jerky. His stomach roared in protest, a physical pain that bent him double. Every instinct of self-preservation screamed at him to eat it, to shout, to wave the hatchet, to scare the beast away. He looked at the wolf again. In the creature's eyes, he saw a reflection of his own soul. 2 ghosts haunting a world that didn't want them. "You got kicked out too, huh?" Elias whispered, his voice cracking from disuse. The wolf flinched at the human sound, but didn't run. It didn't have the energy to run. Elias made a choice. It was a stupid choice. It was a choice that defied survival logic. But Elias, a former logger who had lost his job, his home, and his dignity to a broken back and a broken system, was tired of logic. Logic said, "Let the weak die." "Damn fool, old man," he muttered. Slowly, agonizingly, Elias broke the thick slab of venison in half. The fiber of the meat tore with a sound that seemed incredibly loud. The smell intensified. The wolf's golden eyes widened. A low whine, almost a whimper, escaped its throat. Elias tossed the larger half onto the snow between them. "Go on," he whispered, "before I change my mind." The wolf lunged. It didn't eat. It inhaled. The meat vanished in seconds. The animal licked the snow where the meat had rested, desperate for the salt. When it was done, it sat back on its haunches. It looked at Elias for a long, unblinking moment. The desperation in its eyes had dimmed, replaced by a profound, ancient curiosity. An understanding passed between them in the freezing darkness, a transaction between 2 dying things. Then, without a sound, the wolf turned and melted back into the blizzard like smoke. Elias ate his small portion, licking his fingers clean. He curled into a ball, wrapped his arms around his chest, and prepared to die. He had given away his margin of error. He didn't die, but the morning brought no relief. Elias woke because the silence was too loud. The blizzard had broken, leaving behind a world that was blindingly white and lethally cold. The sun hammered down on the drifts, but it offered no warmth. He was alive, but he was wrecked. The small amount of food hadn't been enough to fuel his internal furnace through the night. His joints felt like rusted hinges. His chest felt like it was filled with ground glass. He coughed, a wet, rattling sound that tasted of copper. Pneumonia. It was setting in fast. He needed wood. His small supply was buried or burned. He spent the next 3 hours painfully dragging fallen limbs toward his cedar sanctuary. He moved like a zombie, his mind drifting in and out of fever dreams. He thought about his old life in Oakhaven, the rental house on Elm Street, the Sunday football games, the feeling of being a person who mattered. That man was dead. This man was just a problem to be solved by the winter. Around noon, the sound of an engine shattered the pristine silence of the forest. Adrenaline surged through Elias, chasing away the fatigue for a moment. Engines meant people. People out here meant trouble. He scrambled out of his lean-to, shielding his eyes against the glare. A black Ford F-150 with the county emblem on the door was crunching through the fresh powder, tire chains clanking rhythmically. It stopped 50 yards from his camp, where the old logging road ended. 2 men got out. Elias's heart sank like a stone. It was Deputy Harlan, a young, nervous kid, and Sheriff Brody. Sheriff Brody was a man whose authority hung on him heavier than his gut. He was a petty tyrant with a badge, a man who viewed poverty not as a tragedy, but as a personal insult to his jurisdiction. He hated Elias. He hated the mess, the poverty, the reminder that Oakhaven wasn't the paradise he claimed it was on the brochures. "Elias!" Brody shouted, his voice booming in the stillness. He didn't bother walking closer, just stood by the truck, hand resting casually on his holster. He wore aviator sunglasses that reflected the snow, hiding his eyes. "Told you last month, you gotta move on. This is county land." Elias leaned against the cedar trunk, too weak to shout back. He waved a hand weakly. "Got nowhere to go, Sheriff. Roads are closed anyway. Pass is snowed in." "Roads are open enough for me," Brody sneered, spitting a stream of brown tobacco juice into the pristine white snow. "We got complaints. People cross-country skiing don't want to see this eyesore. You're scaring the tourists." There were no skiers out here, not in this snow depth. Brody just wanted him gone. He wanted to sanitize the woods. "I need a few days," Elias croaked, stumbling forward a few feet. "Just let the snow melt a bit. I'll move camp." Brody shook his head, reaching into the bed of the truck. He pulled out a red plastic gas can. The sight of it made Elias's blood run cold, colder than the air. "Not this time, old man. We're cleaning this up today. Executive order from the council. Public health hazard." Brody started walking toward the lean-to, struggling slightly in the deep drifts. He unscrewed the cap of the gas can. "You can catch a ride back to town with us. Maybe the church basement has a cot. But this," he gestured to Elias's meager home, the only thing keeping him alive, "this burns today." "You can't do that," Elias whispered, pushing himself off the tree. Panic gave him a surge of manic energy. "It's all I have. My sleeping bag, my pictures. It's all I have." "I can, and I am." Brody reached the cedar log. He began splashing gasoline onto the tarp, onto the dry wood stash Elias had spent the morning collecting. The smell of fumes overpowered the clean pine scent of the woods, a chemical violation of nature. Elias lunged. He didn't think, he just moved. He grabbed Brody's arm, his grip weak but desperate. "Stop it! Please!" Brody, surprised by the old man's speed, whirled around. He shoved Elias hard with his free hand. "Get off me, you bum!" Elias, weak and unsteady from the fever and hunger, flew backward. He hit a patch of ice beneath the snow and went down hard. The air left his lungs in a painful whoosh. He landed on his bad back, pain radiating down his legs like lightning. He lay there, staring up at the blue sky, gasping, unable to move. Brody stood over him, panting slightly. He pulled a silver Zippo lighter from his pocket. He looked down at Elias with a sneer of disgust. "You brought this on yourself, Elias. You refuse to integrate. You refuse to follow the rules." Brody flicked the lighter. The flame danced, orange and eager against the white snow. "Consider this a favor. We're saving you from freezing to death by forcing you to town." Elias closed his eyes. Tears leaked out, hot and burning. This was it. Defeated by a man with a badge and a gallon of gas. His home was about to be ash. He waited for the heat. Ow! The sound didn't come from far away. It didn't drift over the mountains. It came from everywhere. It wasn't the lonely, desperate cry of the previous night. This was a chorus, a deep, resonant, guttural vibration that seemed to shake the snow from the trees. It was the sound of an army. Brody froze. The lighter flame paused inches from the gasoline-soaked tarp. Deputy Harlan, by the truck, scrambled backward, his hand fumbling for his service weapon. "What the hell is that?" Brody murmured, his head whipping around, scanning the dense tree line. The howling stopped abruptly. It was replaced by a silence so profound it hurt the ears, the kind of silence that predates violence. Then they emerged. From the north side of the clearing, a shadow detached itself from the trees. A massive black wolf stepped out, the Alpha. Its shoulders were broad as a linebacker's, its coat thick and lustrous. Its eyes were intelligent, calculating, and fixed entirely on the man holding the fire. From the east, two more wolves appeared, gray and brown phantoms flowing over the snow with liquid grace. They flanked the Alpha, heads low, lips pulled back to reveal ivory daggers. And then, from behind Elias, another one appeared. It moved slower than the others. It was smaller. Its fur was ragged, and its left ear was torn in half. It was the lone wolf, the outcast, the one Elias had fed. It trotted past Elias, ignoring him completely. It didn't look at him. It walked straight toward Sheriff Brody and stopped 10 feet away, planting itself between the fallen man and the sheriff. It didn't snarl. It didn't bark. It just stood there, planting its feet firmly in the snow, its golden eyes locked onto Brody's face. Brody looked at the 5 apex predators encircling the camp. He looked at the massive black Alpha who was now taking slow, measured steps forward. He looked at the ragged wolf standing guard over the old man. The Zippo flickered in his shaking hand. The flame wavered. "Harlan!" Brody yelled, his voice cracking an octave higher than before. "Harlan, get the rifle! Shoot them!" "Don't move," Elias whispered from the ground. He understood what was happening, even if Brody didn't. "If you raise a weapon, they'll tear you apart before you can cycle the bolt." The Alpha wolf took another step. It lowered its head, and a low rumble started in its chest. It was a sound felt more than heard, a subsonic vibration of pure menace. It wasn't hunting behavior. This wasn't about food. This was territorial defense. This was protection. The ragged wolf with the torn ear took a step toward Brody, baring its teeth. It snapped the air, a warning click of jaws that echoed in the clearing. Brody was a bully, and, like all bullies, his courage was a fragile construct that evaporated when faced with superior, unreasoning force. He wasn't dealing with a vagrant he could push around. He was dealing with the raw, brutal hierarchy of nature. He looked at the Alpha. He looked at the wolf guarding Elias. He saw the intelligence in their eyes. They weren't just animals in that moment. They were a jury. Brody slowly closed the Zippo. The clink of the metal lid was the loudest sound in the world. "All right," Brody said, his voice trembling, sweat beading on his forehead despite the freezing air. He backed away slowly, hands held up. "All right, we're leaving. Just call them off." "I didn't call them," Elias rasped, pulling himself up to a sitting position. "And I can't call them off. Just go." Brody kept backing up, his boots stumbling in the snow, until he hit the door of his truck. He scrambled inside, nearly falling. Harlan was already in the driver's seat, engine revving. The truck tires spun frantically, throwing up plumes of snow before the chains bit into the ice. The vehicle slewed sideways, corrected, and then sped back down the logging road, retreating faster than they had come. Elias sat in the snow, his heart hammering against his ribs. The pack remained still until the sound of the truck faded completely into the distance. Only then did the tension break. The alpha wolf looked at the ragged wolf. A silent communication passed between them. A nod of the head, a reaffirmation of status. The ragged wolf wasn't just an outcast anymore. He had brought value. He had brought a weird two-legged ally who had provided food in the famine. By protecting Elias, the ragged wolf had proven his worth to the alpha. He had shown he could contribute to the pack's survival. The alpha turned and vanished into the trees. The other two followed. The ragged wolf turned around. It walked over to where Elias sat. It leaned down, its wet nose inches from Elias's face. Elias could smell the wildness on its breath, the scent of pine and blood. He didn't flinch. He wasn't afraid. The wolf chuffed, a soft, exhaling sound, and then licked the side of Elias's frozen cheek once. The tongue was rough as sandpaper and warm. Then, without looking back, the wolf turned and followed its family into the shadows. They had taken him back, and, in doing so, they had saved the man who saved their brother. Elias lay there for a long time, the cold seeping back into his body, but his spirit burning with a strange new fire. He slowly pushed himself up, groaning with pain, and crawled into his gas-soaked lean-to. He wouldn't be able to light a fire near the tarp for days, but the structure was standing. He was standing. He slept deeply, dreamlessly, protected by the knowledge that the woods were watching. When he woke the next morning, the fever had broken. He felt weak, hunger gnawing at him again with renewed ferocity, but his lungs felt clearer. The air was crisp. He crawled out of the lean-to to assess the damage to his woodpile. He stopped cold, 20 feet away, in the very center of the clearing where Brody had stood. The snow was stained a brilliant, shocking crimson. Lying there was the carcass of a young elk calf. It was freshly killed, steam still rising faintly from the open cavity. The hindquarters had been neatly severed and removed. The pack's share, the alpha's tax. But the rest of it remained. The shoulders, the loin, the ribs. Hundreds of pounds of nutrient-dense meat. Elias stared at the offering. He fell to his knees in the snow. Tears, hot and fast, froze on his cheeks. He reached out and touched the fur of the elk. It wasn't charity. It wasn't pity. It was a dividend. He wasn't part of their pack. He knew that. They were wild, and he was human. He belonged to a world of taxes and property lines and sheriffs who poured gasoline on the homes of the poor. But in the depths of that terrible blizzard, a transaction had occurred. A shared moment of suffering had forged a bond deeper than species. He had shared his last meal to save a life, and the pack had returned the favor. Elias looked toward the deep woods, silent and towering and indifferent. He pulled his knife from his belt. He was still homeless. He was still poor. The world of men still didn't want him. But as he began to dress the elk, preparing the meat that would sustain him for months, Elias smiled. He would survive the winter. He wasn't alone out here anymore. The woods had accepted him, and that was a citizenship far more valuable than anything Oak Haven could offer.